So I wanted to, first of all, thank Leonard McLean for um, helping educate me, because in my last video I made a comment about how, all your devices are recording pretty much everything you say all the time. Now, he actually, and I was particularly referring to the virtual assistants, and he in particular had the Alexa assistant and monitored its traffic going to and from the device very thoroughly. And through that, he discovered, as well as educated me on, the fact that these devices do not, in fact, store everything you say or send it out. All they do is they'll take a look. My guess, from what he's told me, is that they'll just take a look at what you're saying, dump it. But then once that one key word is sent or is said, then the system knows to back up a second or so, capture that word, and say, okay, the rest of what you say is going to be sent out. So I wanted to thank him for doing that, for educating me. And in case I may have seemed a little overzealous, I am very sorry. But you have to understand, aside from Siri's voice typing and the occasional Google Now, I've never really used these assistants, and there was a lot of press going around about how the devices recorded everything you said every single time. I remember there was a scare a while back about the Samsung TVs, and it was all over the major tech blogs that I like to read. And so, as they say, if you see it enough, you'll start to believe it. So, again, Mr. McLean, thank you so much for going through and running those tests, because it really helped me, and I'm sure it helped out a lot of other people. So, my next thought is on to Microsoft Windows. Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 8, and Windows 10. Windows XP. I don't necessarily hate Windows XP, but I remember back when it came out, it reminded me an awful lot of the then brand new OS X Jaguar. I remember in my graphics class making a comment to the substitute teacher who was in there, and she said, yeah, well, Microsoft copied a lot of ideas from Apple, and that's kind of where I started on the whole who copied who thing, which today I couldn't care less. Windows Vista. Windows Vista is the one that I actually honestly started to hate. Because Windows Vista, if you do a Google search for Sony VAIO, V-A-I-O, UX, Uniform X-Ray, 280, P as in Papa, you will find a tiny little PC that is about the size of, today's phablets, only a lot thicker. Now, I was deciding at the time between that and a Pocket PC device, and the device came preloaded with Windows XP Professional, but it had a free upgrade to Windows Vista. That was the main selling point, because I figured if I was going to keep up with the latest technology, you may as well do it in the most economical way possible, right? Excuse me. Well, I installed Vista. Then I installed some of the assistive software that I use over the top of it. And to this day, I have no idea if it was Vista, or if it was the software, or if it was a combination of both. I can't even remember if the software was ZoomText or Magic I was using. I think it was ZoomText. Or was it Magic? See, I don't even remember. This was 10 years ago. And so I put in Vista onto the system, and I loaded the software. Next thing I know, Vista has what would be Vista's equivalent of a kernel panic, which is blue screen of death, only this was a lot worse. It was a lot worse than a blue screen of death. The system basically died. It would power on, but all I would get was a blank screen with a blinking cursor. It's like everything just completely disappeared. And from that moment on, I was very wary to use Vista. I've not touched Vista since. It was just a major problem. Windows 7. One of my relatives' old Lenovo computers runs Windows 7, and it's been, for the most part, a pretty stable system. You have to put 6 years worth of grit on top of it in terms of, you know, just the mechanical hard drive age, the fact that the battery can't hold its charge. But for the absolute basics that this person uses it for, it's perfect. Except for when you go to use the magnifier. In my case, I use the full screen magnifier because without that, the cursor won't enlarge, making navigation especially difficult in some instances. But the best part is if you use full screen, you know how you have Windows updates? I was in the middle of getting plane tickets up to my summer house. And I was in the middle of filling out the passenger information using the magnifier. And out of nowhere, the computer completely restarts. The computer completely restarts. And thankfully, Chrome went ahead and stored everything as is. It just put everything into sort of a save state. But at the same time, because of the fact that I was using magnification and I didn't have any additional audio cues, I had Zoom text on that system, but the trial ran out years ago. I could probably put a newer version on there and get the trial going again, but that's beside the point. Anyway, I was using full screen magnification, and the system just decided to restart. And with the full screen magnification, I couldn't tell if there was an alert that had come up. The sound was off, which makes sense because the person who uses this computer can't really hear anyway. They are moderately deaf, so having sound on the system turned on the system didn't make sense. But overall, that seems to be a problem with the Windows ecosystem. It's just these random restarts. It took 15 minutes. I wasted 15 minutes sitting there, and I was glad that everything was remembered. Otherwise, I'd have to start all over again, and the tickets that I wanted to get were could have been gone. So I'm just glad that Chrome managed to keep everything in order. I remember telling Avast, because an Avast pop-up had come up, and I remember telling Avast, wait to restart in 6 hours. I wanted to give it enough of a time window so that there was no way it would restart while I was in the middle. I did not know that Windows updates were waiting. It's just incredibly annoying. Then there's Windows 8. Now, originally when I used the beta of Windows 8, it actually wasn't too bad. I was willing to shuffle between the two interfaces. But after having used it on a tablet, especially the 7-inch tablets, it was bad. It was bad because you tap on one of these tiles and you have no idea if you're going to start up in a desktop app or a Metro app. You had 2 copies of the same web browser. It was just silly. And then finally we have Windows 10. Now if you keep Windows 10 at the default settings, Microsoft, and it says so in their EULA, their end user license agreement, if you keep everything at the default settings and do the express install, then everything you're doing is being watched. All the keystrokes are being logged, everything. You can turn a lot of that off, but not all of it, from what I understand. This is one of the reasons why if you see my Chewy tablet, it runs video. It runs both Windows and Android, and I do not use that for my daily driver because of the security concerns. I do have Avast running, and Avast does a very good job of protecting, but Microsoft I mean, the fact that they said in their EULA, they said very clearly that we reserve the right to get access to folders on your hard drive, even the private ones. You can see by Windows 10, I'll use it, but it'll never become my daily driver. What will become my daily driver is Chrome OS. You can see it here running Vine and Evernote, and you're probably thinking, well, Chrome OS is just a web browser. At the time of this recording, that is true. But if you have one of 3 Chromebooks, the Acer Chromebook Flip, the Asus Chromebook Flip, excuse me, the Acer Chromebook R11, and Google's own Chromebook Pixel, obviously, you will get an update in the coming weeks to be able to run Android apps on your Chrome OS device. And I've read a lot of the journalist reports, a lot of the tech blogs. From what I understand, the hardware in the Chrome OS systems is even more powerful than the highest end phone. And what that means is the Android apps should run without a problem. And I know that I've already discussed this earlier in a prior video that goes specifically into this, so I'm not going to. But the reason it relates to all the issues that we've had with Windows and the fact that my relative whose system is running Windows 7, the system is so janky that they can't stand it. And originally I was going to get them a Chromebook, but I was thinking later on, and we're looking back a year now, so I was going to get them a Chromebook, and I was thinking, wait a moment, they do use some local software, so maybe I should stick to Windows. And I was all set to get them a system for their birthday that's going to be coming up in about a month or 2. But I talked to them and they decided they'd rather wait, which is actually good news because of the fact that Chrome systems are going to run Android apps. And for them and for every other casual computer user out there, I'd say this is the holy grail. This is just me personally. If you don't have an awful lot of money to spend on a computer, or you just don't like Apple, and you want to try something besides Windows, and again, you don't like Apple, the fact that Chromebooks will be able to run Android apps, to me, is a major godsend, because you can have your Microsoft Word and Skype and things, and for the casual computer user, I think that this could very, very severely, in fact, over time, perhaps, and the keyword is perhaps because we can't predict the future, but a lot of journalists and myself are predicting that if this takes off, that Microsoft and Apple should be very worried. But in all honesty, I can't wait for this. I already said that I couldn't in a prior video, but I'm serious. I really cannot wait for this because you get your plane tickets, then all of a sudden Windows decides to restart. What in the world is that all about, you know? It's like, I stated prior in a video a long time ago that I felt personally that Windows was never really developed with the consumer, the general average consumer in mind, that it was built for the enterprise. And I've always believed that, personally, especially if you read the contents on the blue screen of death. Now Microsoft is trying to clean up that image with Windows 10 and tablets and whatnot. It's been a big success. But at the same time, consumers have moved on to things like Chromebooks and Android devices and mobile, general computing devices, to where they've left Microsoft in a bit of a bind as far as desktop PCs are concerned, and they're considering possibly just forgetting the average consumer and turning their focus back to their bread and butter, which is the corporate enterprise market. And to me, I think that's what they should do. I honestly think that's what they should do. Microsoft, when they started Windows, from what I understand, they figured get Windows into the enterprise, it'll trickle into the home. Well, it trickled into the home all right, but over time, especially in the last decade and a half, from 2000 to about 2010 or something, the Macintosh really became, especially after Vista, especially after Windows Vista, the Macintosh became the consumer computer of choice because you didn't have all the issues that you had with Windows that would baffle a general consumer, but an IT professional would be able to clean up. This is why, I personally have always felt that Windows was never meant for the general consumer. It was always meant for the enterprise. And especially now with the heavy influence of mobile operating systems, I'm glad to see. I've read a couple of articles suggesting that Microsoft should abandon the consumer and go to the enterprise. And I think they're doing just that, especially with HoloLens, because HoloLens was not, given the $2,000 price tag, it's clear the device was not intended for excuse me, for early consumer adoption. It was intended for the enterprise, for the business sector. And that, I think, is where Microsoft should remain. These were just some random thoughts, but I just wanted to get that particular blow against Windows off my chest, especially after what happened earlier this evening. Feel free to add your comments. Thank you for watching. Comments are welcome, and have a nice day.